That's why music is subjective, and music expresses things in a different way to different people at different times, and that's okay. And we can acknowledge that, hey, this might not be my cup of tea, but I'm glad it's someone else's. Hi, guys. Welcome to the Church Split. And did you know that Christian rock and metal actually exists? Did you just find out and your whole world just melted around you? Well, yes, says a lot of Christian Karens all over the place online, because Skillet just recently released a song of O Come Emmanuel in their heavy style. And now, most people know that Skillet is a very popular hard Christian rock band, and they don't usually go full on into like heavy metal or do full on breakdowns. They're kind of like what I always joke around with, that they're kind of like the Nickelback of the Christian scene, which is like your way to enter into the harder rocky scene, but like there's way cooler and like deeper stuff over here they can get into. But like John Cooper and the entire band, I highly respect. I actually really enjoy their music. They're better than Nickelback, but you get my point. So that is what recently, like, people just apparently just now discover them, and people are big mad about their cover of O Come Emmanuel. And here's the thing: I like my Christmas songs, and O Come Emmanuel is by far my favorite of all of them. I love the minor key, I love the tone, I love the message in it, and unfortunately, it doesn't get as much attention as other songs do. And I normally like my classic songs sang very classically. I don't usually like people messing with them too much, but I actually really did enjoy their version because it totally took a different angle on it. And instead of trying to make it a bunch of like hip hop or like poppy riffs and like, all the Mariah Carey treatment, they just actually gave it a very different hard rock feel, which I actually really enjoyed. But apparently other people can't handle it. So, breaking news: Christian Karens have discovered that Skillet's new Christmas song is naturally very Skillet in style, but even heavier than others. And naturally, they think it's satanic, because of course they do. Because apparently, if it's not sung by a choir of little Christmas elves in a Hallmark movie, it must be demonic. So let's actually set the record straight on this and discuss the actual problem, what they're saying here. So let's be real. Some Christians can find the devil in absolutely anything. Rock music, demonic. Drums, absolutely witchcraft. Minor chords, straight from the pits of hell, or maybe Mordor itself. We don't know. But here's the shocker: Skillet's Christmas song isn't satanic, and it's not even close. And I get so tired of this whole thing of how Christian rock, like people, like rock artists, are treated in the Christian scene. Not everything has to sound like a Hallmark song, and not everything has to sound like it's straight from Hillsong United or Bethel or literally any of the other mainstream stuff. In fact, they typically are a little bit more theologically sound than a lot of those things that speak half the time like heresy or really watered down milk toast Jesus is my boyfriend songs. So yeah, they actually explore actually what it means to be hurt, or what it could be to participate in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and what it means to defeat death itself. And it really can explore a lot of really hard and aggressive themes that other things don't. And that's kind of the point. It also it can discuss heartbreak at a much deeper level, it seems like. And then there's other things that it does that talks about the great Christian hope. One of my favorite Christian metal bands is Holy Name, and one of their phrases is, we fear no great unknown. Or Demon Hunter, that says, death is on my side. These are amazing statements that are actually have a lot of depth when you listen to all their songs. But instead, what we have is Christian Karens getting mad because it doesn't sound like what they hear on a Sunday morning, because frankly, we have gate kept what happens on a Sunday morning for so long. And now, ironically, people have wondered for so long, how do we engage men in worship? How do we get more men to not feel like it's all girly? Well, one of the reasons is you can stop having a freak out fest whenever there's something that's undoubtedly masculine. When hard Christian music enters the scene and explores masculine ideas of storming the gates of hell, of death being on your side, of not having to fear the great unknown, and being willing to die for your savior, and all those things, maybe start doing some of those songs. Maybe bring some of that in, where men actually go, yes, we are at spiritual warfare. Let's storm those gates of hell right now. But instead, you want to keep doing your Jesus is my boyfriend songs, and you see us and you see who we really are, and all that sort of thing. Which there's nothing wrong with singing about some of those things, but also the overemphasis of it in one direction really tends to resonate with one particular gender over another. Even though I know there's a lot of women who also enjoy hard rock and Christian metal and all those things, but let's just be honest. that scene tends to be dominated by men, which is why it's weird when you have a female singer, let's say, in that world, where you don't run into that as often. But anyway, I digress. Here's what the song actually does. So the whole message is literally about light breaking through the darkness. That's what O Come Emmanuel is about. It's about Israel feeling in exile, feeling like they're in darkness. And so this means, fun fact for you, is the exact storyline of the entire Christmas narrative. The whole thing of, John 1:5, that's Isaiah 9. That's the gospel. That's the idea of the light breaking through the darkness. So a lot of times people misunderstand what breakdowns are, and that's what they included here. And their trailer is the breakdown of them, of the screaming and the crunchy guitars and the drums at a crazy like rhythmic level. What's happening oftentimes in those things is like is a complete emotional breakdown and expression of what they're feeling inside. So maybe if they're experiencing turmoil, it's a lashing out of that, or a desperate cry for love, or something like artistically. That's what it's trying to express. And why not? Why wouldn't you do that if you're in exile by Babylon? You've seen your entire city burned to the ground. It makes sense actually within the message of O Come Emmanuel, which is why Christian rock does really good with minor keys, and not Christian rock, just rock as a whole, minor keys and metal minor keys, because that communicates more of a sense of sadness and depth or reflection. But when apparently this is it happens in a Christian song, it's the end of the world. So this is childish. This is so childish because this is actually like narrowing down art, what it can be. And then I saw Catholics and stuff too be like, Protestants like say like mock us, but yet this is what they call worship. I'm sorry, I didn't see any specific thing about music styles in the Bible. I just see things like, worship God. Psalm 150 is a great example. Worship God with loud cymbals. This idea of expressing worship loudly, proudly, and emboldened in various different music styles. Their music style back then in the ancient world in the biblical times were very different than our modern hymns. And in fact, you can take our modern hymns, you can take hymns and bring them to another culture, and they will think that it actually sounds like funeral music, like people are wailing at a funeral, when we mean in these old hymns to be singing songs of joy. But in another culture at another time, it does sound different to them. That's why music is subjective, and music expresses things in a different way to different people at different times, and that's okay. And we can acknowledge that, hey, this might not be my cup of tea, but I'm glad it's someone else's. And that's why on Sunday mornings, a lot of the music doesn't jive with me. But you know what? I don't care, because it's not always about what touches my heart or reaches me. But I do think we do need to start adding some other things sometimes in worship to mix it up. Bring back some old hymns, maybe in your hipster churches. So that way you want not only so it can reach old people, but also to see the depth of hymns or the timelessness of those hymns. And like Come Thou Fount. You don't, lyrically speaking, you don't run into that anymore. Or, have some heavier stuff on there that actually deals with some other themes that you don't typically run into, but they're all equally biblical. But anyway, so I digress on all that. If Christian Karens heard King David sing Psalms today, they'd probably also call him like emo or something. Because if you read the Psalms, his stuff is really depressed. It is really raw. He talks about breaking the teeth of the wicked as well. Oh, that's not very Christian of you, David. But meanwhile, that's in your Psalms. This is completely misunderstanding how worship works. Worship is a pouring out of the heart and the emotion and emoting to worship God properly. And that is dealing with that relationship between the divine and the human, and that wrestling that takes place. Not all songs are only about praising God, and not all songs are only about speaking about the human experience. There can be both in those things, and we are okay with that when we see it in modern worship. We're okay with it in old hymns like It Is Well With My Soul. But then when it comes to Christian heavy rock and metal, because it sounds crunchier for whatever reason, we throw it out the window, because like, oh, well, that was brought up by worldly people. Ozzy did all that stuff, and Journey, and sex, drugs, rock and roll. That's the problem with it. Meanwhile, none of them have cared to even look into the history of any of the styles of the music that they liked before. I recently went to Vienna, and it was funny because I went to a little concert there. And when I was in Vienna at this concert, they did a lot of classical songs, which is a lot of what your stuff from the church is even based on. But some of the classical stuff has a lot of sexual themes in it, things that we would now like turn our noses up to. Meanwhile, we do the same. We're okay with that, but then we attack this. It's so trivial and annoying. So the real problem isn't theology. Let's be honest here, because the theology is correct. And in a lot of these Christian metal bands, the theology isn't just correct, it's far superior than most of the nonsense being peddled out by the mainstream Christian churches and songwriters that you can think of. The real problem isn't theology to these people. It's apparently just the vibes. That's all it is. These people aren't upset about the doctrine being taught. They're upset because a Christmas song didn't sound like sleigh bells or sugar cookies. The Skillet wrote a gritty, dramatic Christmas anthem set to almost like a power ballad, and suddenly Karen is clutching her pearls like someone just sacrificed a goat in the living room. This is getting really old, and this is going to continually push people away from the church. And that's just the reality to it. It's going to keep pushing people away from the church, keep pushing artists away from doing artistic expression. It's going to keep us in the same annoying, repeat, repetitious nonsense that we see nowadays. It kills creativity because you're not able to be creative in this space, in the Christian space, where people once built like crazy cathedrals and painted amazing portraits, all as an expression of worship to God, to show God, hey, I love you. And this is a new, daring way for me to express that. We have now said nowadays, we've taken art and we've really cudgeled it into a corner. And I'm not just talking about like sexual themes and things that could, like, not like what the world does. Like, well, all this nudity is an artistic expression. We're not talking about that. We're talking about just literally an expression in sound. And that sound is so foreign to people, they just instantly call it evil. And that's exactly the problem here. It's not evil. You're just thinking that it is because it's not the vibe you are looking for or that you connect with. But I, for one, tend to connect better with hard rock or classical music. That's where I'm at. I'm like classical, hard rock, and metal over here. And then all the other stuff in between that sounds like pop music, I usually just, I'm like, this all sounds very samey to me. And I don't really feel like it gets to the depth. There are exceptions, but there's a general rule there. And I'm not alone in this. There's a reason why the Christian rock and metal scene is increasingly growing anymore. And that's because that's where a lot of creativity lies. I even remember a couple years ago when Demon Hunter released two albums on the same day, one called War and the other one called Peace. And, they're a Christian metal band, and a lot of their stuff is a lot more vague and meant for that to be the case, to kind of explore some depth there. But what's funny is that this album Peace was all melodic, like power ballads and stuff like that, whereas like as a melodic, not nearly as loud and crunchy. So it's supposed to be peace and sound pretty to one degree, or more, at least melodious. And then War was a lot more hard and intense. It was about spiritual warfare versus finding peace in who God is and what he brings in your life. And it was really cool to have these two things released on the same day, because you got to experience that art expressed there. But Christian Karens again would say, that's not okay, despite the fact that one of the songs in War is talking about not bowing down to lesser gods. Like, here I stand to turn to face the odds, and I won't bow to lesser gods. Essentially, it's like that's the whole thing that that song goes through. But anyway, so here's what we need to do. We need to stop confusing art with the occult and calling everything satanic, because there are things that are actually satanic, and when we start calling things that are not satanic, it starts losing its muster, and it starts losing all meaning. Same thing with racism, sexism, or even anti-Semitism. Like, all these things have lost all meaning because we use it so flippantly that we've completely removed it from its definitional scope. Again, using imagery like darkness, struggle, longing, anger doesn't make something satanic. The Bible does it constantly throughout. Jesus was literally born in the middle of a cosmic darkness. And that is a continual theme that runs through it. So not everything intense is demonic. That is very important that we understand. Not everything that is intense is demonic. Sometimes it's just art. Shocking, I know. But there is not a single verse you could ever pull from that shows that somehow this is evil or that this is wrong. So please, before accusing Skillet of summoning Beelzebub himself, because their Christmas song has a guitar riff and a breakdown in it, maybe, just maybe, remember the first Christmas was not a cozy Hallmark special. It was a gritty, messy, awful, dangerous situation, but also expressly beautiful as the incarnation came and dwelt among us. Because Herod was a wicked ruler. There was nothing but spiritual darkness when Jesus Christ came. It was awful. And to express that longing in a song with a metal breakdown is fantastic. And I'm just going to say this. If the Christian Karens are against it, I'm probably going to be for it because generally speaking, they have no idea what they're talking about. It's Dorian virtue level of discernment, and it's not very strong. Because again, you can't apply the standards that they apply to stuff. You can't apply it to anything else consistently. There's no consistency in that because as soon as you start dissecting even one section of their complaints, the entire thing falls apart. And because again, you can say all the same words, apparently, like in O Come Emmanuel, and they're like, oh, it's a beautiful Christmas hymn. You change the style, suddenly it's the end of the world. But that style can also be used to express a theme of that no one has explored deeply before. Pretty cool and impressive stuff. I was very impressed that they actually were willing to go that far in their song and actually go and do a full-on like breakdown. That doesn't happen in Skillet very often. They usually hang out real cozy in like the harder rock area. They don't usually go that far in. And I thought it was kind of cool that they did it. And I think that we should commend them for it, for some artistic expression, and also stopping Christian Karens who freak out over literally every artistic expression ever. It amazes me, especially like Catholics of all people who are opposed to this. Really funny to me when literally their entire cathedrals, like I just went to one in like multiple ones in Vienna, and the imagery there, some of it's really gruesome, and that's okay because that like part of the Christian message too is like if you're seeing Christ on the cross, like look at one of the most hideous things ever to happen to a person, and remember hope in it. That's the whole point, like memento mori, like remember you will die. In fact, the whole emo scene, the skulls and all that focus on like, oh, death, so live, think of death so that way you might live. That was a Christian art movement, bro. Like the entire emo scene is basically built off of a Christian art movement, thinking that, remember, you will die, so live your life in accordance to your death. How do you want to be remembered? And that's part of the Christian hard rock and metal scene as well. But of course, this goes over people's heads because they would rather clutch their pearls, look down like little Pharisees, and be holier than thou and try to attack a group of people who are good Christian worshiping people. And John Cooper of Skillet has resisted the progressive Christian agenda for years. He has also boldly spoken out against all those who have deconstructed. And he's one of the few that are like this. I am going to stand as a Christian, as a conservative Christian, unapologetically. It's actually quite refreshing. And yet those people who would stand on those values are attacking him because they don't like his style. It really reminds me of the old Christian metal band Striper, if you guys are familiar with them. They heard the gospel, they became Christians, and then they were like, they were like a Christian like they were a metal band, and then they became Christian metal band. So they started doing with the style that they know. And then they got crucified by the very person who gave them the gospel. And they're like, that really hurts because we're doing this for God. And that's why they have that awesome song, To Hell with the Devil. It's awesome. It's such a good song, by the way. You should check it out. And it's like, okay, so people actually express their worship in a style that's familiar to them, that they resonate with. And then we just crucify them for it because it doesn't sound like what the mainstream wants. Maybe the mainstream shouldn't want what the mainstream wants all the time. Maybe, just maybe, you need your echo chamber challenged. Anyway, guys, what do you think of this whole Skillet controversy? Do you think it's as dumb as I do? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share this video, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Church Split. Take care.